Hey, it's Jonathan McGinley, the owner and founder of Intentional Man, an organization that inspires and equips men to live intentionally, pursue God-sized goals, and build lives of significance. I was having a conversation with a good friend the other day, and we were both talking about how last year we just kind of got overwhelmed by saying yes to too many things. We both felt like we had overcommitted ourselves and that it took away time from some of the things that were the most important to us. Can you relate to that? Have you ever experienced this? Maybe you're experiencing it right now, but it can be really easy to become overly committed, and then you don't end up with enough time for the things that are truly the most important in your life. And one of the things that I struggle with the most is saying no to things that are good things, but not necessarily great things. And I think one of the biggest enemies is diluting your focus on good things, because there's so many good things out there that you could be a part of. There are great ministries, great business opportunities, a lot of great people you could meet with. There's so many fun things to do, time with friends, time with family, different events and experiences. And when something is good, it makes it really difficult to say no, right? But what I realized a lot over the course of last year is that when you say yes to too many good things, you don't actually have time to say yes to the great things, or ultimately to your biggest dreams, your biggest goals. And so oftentimes you have to learn to say no to good things in order to make room for the great things. You have to realize that for every yes that you give, you're also saying no to something else. It's always a trade-off. It's the law of trade-offs. And fully understanding this and keeping it top of mind can help you make better decisions. So for example, every time you say yes to taking on that meeting that you don't really want to do, you're saying no to getting other key tasks done or projects done at work that could actually move your career forward. Every time you say yes to staying in bed in the morning and getting extra sleep, you're saying no to going to the gym and getting in better shape. Every time you say yes to a client or a friend's dinner invitation, you're saying no to time with your wife or your kids. Every time you say yes to looking at social media, you're saying no to being productive, or you're saying no to being present with the people that you're with. Most of us who tend to be people pleasers, like myself, who really love being around people, we have a hard time saying no. But even if we hate saying no, we must understand that every yes inherently contains a no. And once you fully grasp the nature of trade offs, you'll find that it's easier to say no when you need to. So next time you're asked to do something, or you're tempted to do something distracting, you have to think about the trade offs that you're making. Most of us don't do that. We say yes too quickly without really thinking through what we're saying no to. And in his book, Free to Focus, Michael Hyatt gives two questions that he asks himself every time he's confronted with an opportunity. And these have been really helpful for me to ask myself when I'm faced with an opportunity or with a decision. So the first question is this: what will I have to give up in order to say yes to this opportunity? That's question number one. What will I have to give up in order to say yes to this opportunity? And it's a great question because it brings into mind the law of trade-offs that I just mentioned. It's extremely easy to just say yes without thinking about the consequences. That potential meeting opportunity seems harmless in the moment, but when you ask yourself this question, you might realize that it's actually going to steal time away from the people you truly love and the people that you want to invest in. When you realize that what this meeting is truly going to cost you, then it becomes easier to actually say no to it. And so that's question number one. The next one that he asks himself, he says, will saying no to this allow me to say yes to something better? So another great question here. And this hits home with the idea of giving up the good to make room for the great. When you realize that there's actually a much better way of spending your time, it's going to make it easier for you to say no. So using those two questions as a filter can really help you determine what opportunities to take, especially if you're someone like me who struggles to say no. So when I look back on this past year, I honestly can see so many ways where my lack of ability to say no has actually cost me from progressing on some of my biggest dreams, or cost me spending time with the people that I love and doing the things that I love to do. It's also cost me a lot of rest and recovery, which leads to them being more distracted, more or less focused. So your yeses are ultimately no's to something else. So it's very important that you learn to say no to things that aren't in line with your greatest priorities or your long-term vision. In The Power of a Positive No, Harvard professor William Ury gives a strategy for saying no that I thought was super useful. He outlines three different responses that we often give when we don't want to do something. And these are three unhealthy responses. So I'm going to give you those three first, then I'll give you kind of the solution that he provides. So as I go through these, see if you can relate to any of these responses in situations where you want to say no. Okay, so the first is accommodation. And this is where you say yes when you really want to say no. So this happens a lot of times when you don't want to cause conflict or you don't want to let somebody down. So you just say yes to something, even though it's something you don't really want to do. The sad part is, though, that oftentimes you say yes because you don't want to let someone down, but then you can end up letting the people who mean the most to you down because you're taking away time from them. So that could be your wife, or it could be your kids, or even if you're not married, this could be your closest friends. So even time spent with people who aren't going to be lifelong friends can cause you to lose opportunities to spend time with the people that you're truly doing life with, that you truly want to be a part of your life for a long time. So accommodation is the most common response for people who tend to be people pleasers. You don't want to let somebody down, so you just say yes, even though you don't really want to. So have there been any situations in your life recently where this has been the case? It happens to me all the time if I'm not intentional about it. But once you know that this is a typical response of yours, then you can start to identify it more clearly and guard yourself against doing it next time. So that was number one. Number two kind of response that we give sometimes when we want to say no is attack. And this is where you say no poorly. This is where you value your own interests way more than the others. And so you kind of you react with annoyance or resentment or maybe some anger. So you do actually say no, which is good, but you might burn the relationship in the process if you have no regard for the other person's feelings in the situation. So even though you said no when you wanted to, it's not a great response because it's not really sensitive to others. You're saying no with annoyance or anger, and that could completely burn the relationship for the future. So that's number two. The third typical response when you're presented with somebody you want to say no to, some opportunity that you want to say no to, the third response is avoidance. Has anyone done this before? This is where you say nothing at all. You don't return the call. You don't email back. You act like you didn't see the text. You ignore the request or wait a super long time to respond, hoping that things will just resolve themselves automatically. But we all know that that usually doesn't happen. I think you do this because you don't want to hurt the person by saying no, but oftentimes you end up hurting them way worse by not responding or taking so long to respond. So which one of those three responses do you typically fall into when you don't want to do something? Is it accommodation, where you just say yes, even though you don't want to? Is it attack, where you respond with annoyance or anger, and you're not really sensitive to the other person's feelings? Or is it avoidance, where you just don't answer at all and you hope the problem will go away? And sometimes you can actually even do all three of these things at once, where you avoid the initial request. So then the person sends a follow-up. Then you're irritated that they followed up. So you respond poorly. And then you feel bad about responding poorly. So you end up agreeing to do what they asked you to do. And you didn't want to do it in the first place. So you went through a vicious cycle of all three bad responses. And you still ended up doing what you didn't want to do in the first place. Have you been there? I've been there before. So understanding that these three responses are not beneficial can really be helpful next time you're faced with a request that you know you need to say no to. And I've seen how I've done all three of these things in my life in the past. But now that I'm more aware of these responses, I'm better equipped to avoid them in the future. And so Professor William Ury, he gives a fourth option then for responding to opportunities. And this one can help you really actually say no in a good way and not burn relationships in the process. He calls this affirmation. And this follows a yes, no, yes format. So first, you say yes to yourself and what's really important to you. Because you know that by saying no, you're saying yes to something else of higher importance. So you take the time to actually realize that by saying yes to this opportunity, you're saying no to something else that matters much more. So you take time to identify the actual trade-offs and you be okay with saying yes to yourself and saying no to this opportunity. And then it's also good to just start your response by affirming the person instead of just jumping straight into the no. So you can say something like, thank you so much for reaching out. I can see that you're really passionate about this project and I'm really excited for you. You can start with something like that, or you can say, thanks for reaching out. Congratulations on taking on your new position. It's just some sort of statement that affirms them before you jump into the no. So that's the yes part of this equation. After saying yes to yourself and affirming them, then it's important that you clearly say no to the request. You don't want to leave any wiggle room or the possibility of doing it another time if you have no intentions of actually doing it another time. Sometimes we say things like, maybe another time, or I'll see if I can make it work, when you really have zero intentions of ever actually saying yes in the future. So if you don't plan on saying yes, then you need to say that clearly. It can seem like leaving the door slightly open might soften the blow. It might not hurt the other person as much, but it's almost always worse because it keeps their hopes up and then there's no follow through later. So make sure you say no clearly so there's no misinterpretation here. So then after you say no, then you want to affirm the relationship again and possibly offer a solution to the request. So if you can't meet with them, maybe you send them a link to a helpful blog post, or you refer them to someone else. Or if the request is for a 1-hour meeting, maybe you could say, I can't do a 1-hour meeting, but I'd be happy to jump on a 5-minute phone call instead. But if there's no solution that you can provide, just thank them again for thinking of you and wish them the best of luck. So that's kind of that yes, no, yes response. And it protects your time and your priorities while also taking the other person's feelings into consideration. So again, you say yes to yourself and your priorities and thank them for reaching out. Then you clearly say no, you don't leave any room for misinterpretation, and then end with another possible solution or another affirmation. So that was super helpful for me. It's really helped give me a framework to say no, because I hate saying no because I feel like I'm letting somebody down. So that's a good framework to kind of walk you through next time you're faced with a decision. Being more intentional about how you're saying no to things in your life and having a good strategy for that will help you to actually invest in the things that you want to invest in. It can protect the time where you want to spend with people that are most important to you and allow you to create time to pursue your dreams. So remember, each time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. Always ask yourself, what am I trading off by saying yes to this? And sometimes you will have to say no to some good opportunities in order to make room for those great opportunities, for actually pursuing the things that truly matter to you. So let this be a year where you say yes to what truly matters. Let this be a year where you're running after everything that God has for you with focus and with intensity and with passion. Because the enemy is going to try to distract you with a million different opportunities because he knows that when you're focused, you're a dangerous man. So get clear on what's important to you and run after it with all that you got. So thanks for joining me today. I hope today was helpful. I hope it was encouraging. If you found it impactful, please share it with anyone that you could think could benefit from this training as well. So thanks for being here. Go live a life you're proud of by living intentionally.